Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this franchise horror movie review video. This is part of my current franchise series, which is the Insidious series, where I'm taking a look at all the movies and reviewing them for June here, 2023. So today we're going to take a look at the next Insidious movie in the franchise, which is actually the last, at least for a few weeks, the last one, which is Insidious The Last Key here from 2018. Again, another Insidious movie that was a first time watch for me for this review. I have watched and reviewed the first three movies in this series. Those are up on my channel if you want to check them out. But yeah, today we're going to talk about Insidious The Last Key. So let's just go ahead and get into it. So, Insidious The Last Key is a 2018 American supernatural horror film directed by Adam Robitel and written by Lee Winnell. It is produced by Jason Blum, Oren Peli, and James Wan. It is the fourth installment in the Insidious franchise and the second in the chronology of the story running through the series. The film follows parapsychologist Elise Rainier as she investigates a haunting in her childhood home. So basically, in 1953, Elise Rainier lives in Five Keys, New Mexico, with her parents Audrey and Gerald and younger brother Christian. Elise and Christian encounter a ghost in their bedroom. Frightened, Christian looks for a whistle their mother gave him to call for help, but he cannot find it. Gerald, furious, cans, canes Elise and locks her in the basement. Elise opens a mysterious red doorway and is briefly possessed by a demonic spirit. Audrey is killed by the demons. Decades later in California in 2010, Elise works as a paranormal investigator with her colleagues Specs and Tucker. A man named Ted Garza calls, saying he's been experiencing paranormal activity at his house. Realizing it's her childhood home, Elise departs to help him. While investigating, she finds Christian's lost whistle, but it disappears again after she encounters a female spirit. Elise tells Specs and Tucker that she had seen the spirit before when she was a young girl. She had she had fled the house in fear of another beating from her father, abandoning Christian. So yeah, that's the setup and the premise for Insidious: The Last Key from 2018. As far as the cast goes, we have Lynn Shay as Elise Rainier, Angus Sampson as Tucker, Lee Winnell as Specs, Spencer Locke as Melissa Rainier, Caitlin Gerald as Imogen Rainier, Bruce Davidson as Christian Rainier, Kirk Acevedo as Ted Garza, and Josh Stewart as Gerald Rainier. So yeah, that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for the fourth Insidious movie, Insidious: The Last Key here, which is part of this four pack. Which I'm actually going to be getting rid of this because I like these movies well enough where I'm getting them on Blu-ray. In fact, I just ordered them to be delivered on Blu-ray probably by next week. So I'm excited for that. Obviously, I have this one on Blu-ray already, but I'm getting these three. So, which includes obviously The Last Key. So as I said, Insidious: The Last Key is the last film, at least until July 7th, when The Red Door comes out. But as far as the four movies that I'm reviewing for this series in June, it's the final movie. So, yeah, I like this movie as well. I like all of these movies, quite frankly, to varying degrees. I don't have a whole lot to say about this movie. It's kind of a paint by numbers demon movie. But let's just go ahead and get into it, starting with the things that I liked about Insidious: The Last Key. And kind of like chapter three, I have to start with the most obvious, which is Lynn Shay. Her performance is once again top notch. She does a really phenomenal job of portraying this character of Elise Rainier. In a lot of ways, this is her series. I mean, let's be honest about it. The first two movies I know focused on the family, what you call it, you know, I'm drawing a blank here on a Friday afternoon. Why can't I think of their names? But Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne's family. I can't think of the last name right now. It'll come to me, I'm sure. But Elise Rainier was still a big part of it, especially the first original Insidious movie. But the last two movies, in particular, have been sort of a backstory. not only of how she got to be where she is with teaming up with Tucker and Specs in the third movie, but in this movie we go back even further and take a look at her roots. So this really is her series, and I think yeah, well, Len Shay's been in a lot of other movies, a lot of other horror movies, and she's very good. I think the Insidious franchise is really what's made her a horror icon. And yeah, this movie, this might be the best of the best because it really does focus on her character. So a lot more is asked of her in this movie, even in the third one. And she does a phenomenal job. I think her acting as well as the way the character is written, she just brings so much to this character in terms of keeping it grounded and portraying it about as well as you can. Her character has a likability where we as the viewers root for her in all of these movies. So yeah, Lynn Shay is definitely the biggest positive I can say for Insidious: The Last Key. Also, I really like the movie, how this movie transitions and ties really well into the first Insidious movie. Pretty seamlessly, honestly. I really enjoyed one particular scene, like what the third movie did as well, a scene that explains or something happens in this movie that explains a scene from the first original Insidious movie, and it's just I just love that stuff. It's very clever, it's very thought provoking, and just very interesting. Um, and of course, this movie does take place in 2010. I think it actually takes place like a few weeks before the events of the first Insidious movie. Basically, in fact, the end of this movie basically I'm not going to give it away, but I mean it takes us right into that first Insidious movie. So I really like that. I'm a big stickler for continuity, especially in horror franchises, and I have to say Insidious is, from what I've seen, is one of the best in terms of not ignoring stuff that's come before it. All these movies tie together really well. So that's one thing I really enjoyed, and particularly in this movie, like I said, about that scene that takes place early on in the first Insidious movie. There's a nice tie-in here in this movie. So that was very much a pro for me. Once again, this movie, like the other three Insidious movies, has a nice, creepy, Insidious type atmosphere and tone that really aligns and fits in well with those other movies in the franchise. So I really like that, kind of going on to the continuity thing that I was talking about. I liked how they focused on Elisa's character and backstory, going back to when she was a young girl and her upbringing with her parents and her family, and how it sort of ties into the current day being 2010, of course. Um, I especially like the scene in this movie, opening sequence. It's about 15 minutes, where she's a young girl and she's got a brother and her parents. Really like the first 15 minutes or 15-20 minutes of this movie. I thought that was a very effective way to get into the movie. And again, it's all a very interesting look at a character that we've come to know throughout this franchise so far, to be able to see her and tie everything back to the point where now when we watch the first movie, when we go back and watch the original Insidious movie, we're going to have much more context of this character of Elise Rainier. And I think they do it throughout this franchise in a way that really works well and really speaks well to that character. So yeah, just very excellently written and done in that regard. I also have to say I enjoyed some of the twists and turns throughout the movie. I'm not going to say they were all shocking, but the twists they give us, there's some smaller ones, there's some bigger ones. I thought they were very clever and very unique, and that's something that this franchise has done a good job on. It does give us some stuff that maybe goes against the grain and doesn't just fall in line in a predictable way. And this movie's no exception to that. There's one twist in particular that was really interesting where we're basically told to dislike, like midway to the end of the movie, there's some characters that are pretty despicable in this movie that were introduced to at different points of the beginning and the middle of the movie, and then you find out there's a little bit more to it than meets the eye, and things like that are just really interesting to me. So I thought they did a really good job in giving us some more thought provoking kind of ideas as they have in this entire franchise. So yeah, those are my pros for Insidious: The Last Key. As far as cons go, I have to say, from a structure standpoint, I think this is the first and only movie so far in the franchise. It feels the most discombobulated. I actually did type that word in my notes too. I just wanted to use the word discombobulated. Um, but I don't know. The first three movies of the series felt like they had a really good flow from first act all the way through third act. This movie's a little bit more hit or miss. It's kind of like fitting block pegs into holes. They don't fit quite as well as the first three movies did, in my opinion. There's some slow and boring parts towards the end of the first act and the beginning of the second act, the middle of the movie. Some things that they just don't really flow as well from the second act into the third act as well. And it's really the first time in this franchise where I've really felt that and had that be the case. Also, this movie, I have to say, of all four of them, feels the most formulaic. I don't know if part of that's because this is the first movie and the only movie so far that wasn't directed by either Lee Winnell or James Wan. It was directed by Adam Robitel, who does a decent job, but I just think it's kind of missing those ingredients in the first three movies that really worked for this franchise. And this feels a little bit more paint by numbers, a little bit more formulaic. And I don't know how much of that had to do with having a different director. I also know the budget was a little bit lower on this movie, as I'll get into here with another con I have. But yeah, just of the four movies, this one does feel the most formulaic to me for this particular genre. So I have to put that down as a con. Once again, the humor is really forced in this movie to the point where it's cringy by Tucker and Specs at certain moments. I will admit I chuckled a couple of times, but for the most part, once again, as you've heard in my other reviews, I just don't understand why they try to force this humor on us with these two. I realize in horror movies, a lot of times you want to take the audience off the hook for a minute or two, but I don't know. It just doesn't work that well in this series. I think part two was the one that I said was okay. It was probably done the best. In this movie, they definitely really pushed the humor, and as I said, to the point where I think and there's moments where it's the most cringy in the entire franchise for me. Once again, by Tucker and Specs. Those are the two characters that they try to push the humor with. It just doesn't. Again, as I said before, it's just forced and really doesn't need to be there. Getting on to the lower budget that this movie clearly had compared to the other movies, the downsizing that we get basically, especially as it relates to the further, is pretty obvious in this movie. What we get of the further is just not as visually interesting or as vast. It's not as big. We don't get as many demonic creatures and visual effects that we got in the other three movies. So that was something that I noticed and that kind of brought it down for me. Overall, I probably have to say it's probably the least scary in the series. I think part three kind of went down a little bit in terms of the scares, but even that one was still a little creepier than this one. This one, well, it does have some nice moments, some nice creepy moments and effective scenes and buildup of tension. I just don't think it's done as well as the first three movies. It's really missing that James Wan Lee Winnell horror movie quality or feel. And I just really felt it more in this movie that it was missing that originality and that get under your skin kind of horror that the first couple movies had, and even the third movie to a certain extent. So this one felt a little bit more jump scary as part of that paint by numbers movie that I was talking about. Um, and then my final comment is I don't think the main demon is really just not all that impressive visually compared to some of the other demons or main villains we've gotten in this franchise. And also I have to say they show them a little bit too much to where it's not quite as effective, both from a visual standpoint and from a scary standpoint. I think you're better off keeping these demons, these ghosts in the shadows, at least until the very end. And yeah, therefore it's just not quite as effective as some of the other ones that we've gotten in this franchise. But all that being said, guys, I still really enjoy Insidious: The Last Key. I think it really fits in well in this franchise. I definitely don't dislike it or hate it or anything like that. And I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I still think it's a really good Insidious movie that ties in really well with all the other movies. And it has a nice backstory to Elise Rainier, who's like the main character of this series. And Lynn Shay is phenomenal in this movie, as she is in the entire series. So, as I said, it's just not quite as under your skin horror as the first couple of movies or earlier in the franchise. But I still enjoy it. 7 out of 10 for Insidious: The Last Key. Go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of Insidious: The Last Key from 2018. Did you like it more than me, less than me? Why or why not? Please comment down below. Also, please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos for this series, which is really only one more video, which is going to be my overall wrap up of this current franchise, excluding the fifth movie, of course, which doesn't come out till July 8th. And then also my ranking of the four movies that'll be coming out, dropping in the next four days or so, probably. But also, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my great horror content that I have coming up. Basically, the rest of the year I have a plan for. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of that. So thank you for watching. I hope you guys once again are enjoying this series review, this franchise review of the Insidious series. Hope everybody's doing well, but stay scared. Bye.